Well, Macron says EU plans to build migrant processing centers will only work if African governments lead the initiative. To date, no country has volunteered to host those platforms. Macron says Europe wants to discourage people from making the dangerous journey across the Mediterranean Sea. He maintains that establishing processing centers in North Africa will work if some African governments agree to organize them.
We want to do more in economy. Your economy is so important and it's huge. We have a lot of French companies present on the ground in building mats, real estate, obviously oil and gas, transportation and infrastructures and so on. But I want France to be much more present for small and medium enterprises and in different sectors like digital.
For Nigeria, which I personally emphasize, is the inter-basin transfer of Lake Chad and the Sahel security. What France is doing, we all know, in trying to stabilize the region, especially in dealing with G5.
And as we've just heard, President Macron made those comments during his two-day visit to Nigeria. The French leader is on a mission to improve relations with English-speaking African nations. While he was in Abuja, President Macron met with his counterpart, President Muhammadu Buhari. The two have discussed trade and security. France has recommitted to helping Nigeria fight extremism. President Macron is also an advocate for the G5 Sahel Force. Macron has also paid tribute to legendary Nigerian musician Fela Kuti. At Kuti's nightclub in Lagos, the French leader announced the African cultural season, which will be held in Paris in celebration of African art and heritage. Nigeria is France's biggest trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa, and companies like Total and Peugeot are entrenched in Nigeria. Let's take a look now at perspectives on Macron's visit to Nigeria from both Africa and Europe. And I'm joined by our correspondents Kevin Ozebek in Brussels and Deji Badmus in Lagos. Kevin, first to you, President Macron's comments on African migrants, does this not divide European Union countries even further?
Well, it has to be said this was already a very divisive issue here in Europe. And it is possible, if not likely, that Macron's comments will further anger the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, who is very much in favor of having these asylum centers, these European asylum centers, set up on the African continent. Also, though, important to note, though, that last week when the EU leaders were here in Brussels, when it comes to these disembarkation centers, is what they called them, EU leaders only agreed to just look at the idea. They didn't say they were going to move forward with it because there were always a lot of questions about the reality of these actually sprouting up. And one of the reasons why is because there was no African country that has come forward and that has said they are willing to host it. And that remains to be the very case. So it's very possible that this concept of these external EU asylum centers will remain just that, a concept, and never get off the ground.
Well, Deji, to you though, Nigeria experienced a different kind of a French president, and the French president himself did mention that he had been an intern in Nigeria in 2002. Now Macron speaks perfect English. Does this say something about his politics?
Absolutely, Beatrice. The fact that he speaks English has endeared him to virtually all the Nigerians that he's met. For instance, last night he was he addressed a group of young entrepreneurs, and you could see that connection between him and these young entrepreneurs, all because of the commonality of language. You know, speaking to them, and they actually connected. We saw that also when he came to Fela Kuti's shrine. I'm talking about the Africa shrine now. He connected with virtually everybody there, and everybody simply likes him. There's no question about that. And the fact that he's a young man as well is it's an added advantage. And no doubt, even though Nigeria is surrounded by French-speaking countries, the application and use of that language is still very low in this country. There are quite a number of French language institutes in this country, but the language has still not gained traction as such. So the fact that you have a French president who has come and is able to speak the language that the people understand, which is English, is no doubt a plus. And then it says a lot about the kind of person or the kind of leader Mr. Macron is, that he is a global leader and thinks globally. And you could tell from all that he says, from the way he communicates, the ideas that he expounds and all of that. So no question at all that Mr. Macron is a global leader. At least that is the perception the majority of Nigerians that he's met have. And he very much liked here, Beatrice, very much liked here.
Well, Kevin, let's return to you, though, on those divisions in the European Union on migration. So what kind of criticism has been leveled at Macron on his views?
Well, some EU leaders, once again, the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte being one of them, have accused him of talking a lot of talk when it comes to migration, but then not taking in more migrants. And that's one of the latest things that have really been brewing here and creating tensions here in Europe. We've seen the past few weeks migrant rescue ships being turned away at Italian ports. And there's been a lot of negotiations between which EU countries are going to take them in. So you have these frontline countries in terms of the migration issue, like Italy and like Greece, really pushing the concept and the idea of these asylum centers outside of the EU. But then you have other countries that really aren't receiving a lot of migrants directly from the Mediterranean, like Germany and France, saying, okay, maybe there are some other issues, some other tactics we have to take here. So at this point, it's quite clear that many European countries view things very differently in how they should change EU asylum policy.
And Deji, could you just recap for us some of the key issues covered by the two presidents, Macron and Buhari?
Well, first is security. Of course, that was the dominant theme of the discussion that they had when both of them met 2 days ago. Of course, President Macron talked a lot about what the French government is doing in the Sahel. We know that the French government is spearheading the formation and the operation of the G5 task force now. President Buhari did ask for the help of the French government now in dealing with the problem of the Lake Chad Basin and, of course, support for Nigeria's fight against the Boko Haram insurgency. And basically, President Macron making it very clear that the French government for now is concentrating its effort in the Sahel and trying to ensure that the G5 task force is up and running. But then he made it clear that, you know, that the French government will continue to help Nigeria in intelligence gathering and sharing. And other than that, the issue of the economy also came up. We heard what President Macron said there, that there are quite a number of French companies operating in Nigeria, but that the French government is willing to still invest more in Nigeria, especially when you talk about digitalization. He talked about that, and we saw the signing of an agreement now of over $400 million agreement now for transportation in Lagos. You have a water project in Kano and then a forestation project in Ogun State. I mean, Lagos, Ogun in the southwest of the country, and Kano, of course, in the north of the country. And then we come down to Lagos. Culture dominated this visit. He was at the Africa Shrine. Quite a big surprise for a lot of people. Nobody expected that he was going to come there. And he connected with the people there. He launched the African Season of Culture there that will be taking place in France in 2020 and made it very clear that France is ready to promote cultural ties now, at least further improve cultural ties now between Nigeria and France and even beyond Nigeria. I mean, we saw he invited people like Youssou N'Dour and Angelique Kidjo. They were both there, right. And clearly sending a message that in terms of culture, France is ready to take things a step further.
Right, Deji Badmus for us there in Lagos and Kevin Ozubek in Brussels. To you both, thank you.